Everyone knows the myth, right? Asians are good students, they play piano, they work hard, they have managed to achieve the American dream. And if they can, why can't other minorities? Asian Americans are the model minority, right? In this video, I will be discussing the model minority and its implications on Asian Americans as well as other ethnic minorities. I will argue that the model minority image is empirically inaccurate, racially stereotypical, and hurts both Asian Americans and other ethnic minorities. In order to analyze Asian Americans as a model minority, we must first define the model minority. McGowan and Lindgren state that the model minority stereotype may be summarized as the belief that a minority, ethnic, racial, or religious group whose members achieve a higher degree of success than the population average. This success is typically measured in income, education, and home ownership. Using this framework, we can empirically measure if Asian Americans are indeed a model minority based on income, education, and home ownership. Many people continue to point at empirical data as proof for the model minority, stating that the median income level for Asian Americans is higher than the average American, or that while Asian Americans only represent 5% of the population, they are overrepresented in top schools around America. I believe all this data can instantly be dismissed as biased as soon as you refer to Asian Americans as a single monolithic group. By overgeneralizing the Asian population, you will overlook the fact that while home ownership percentages for Chinese, Japanese, and Filipinos are 65.7%, 70.8%, and 67.6% respectively, home ownership rates for Cambodian, Hmong, Laotians is 53.3% and Pacific Islanders 48.1%. In fact, Pacific Islanders have the lowest home ownership out of all ethnic minorities, including blacks and Hispanics. Higher education. Another aspect that advocates of the stereotype argue proves the existence of Asians as a model minority is yet another factor that seems to support the model minority if looking at Asian Americans as a monolithic group. 25.3% of whites have college degrees, and 46.3%, 42.8%, 40.8%, and 43.6% are the percentages for Chinese, Filipinos, Japanese, and Koreans respectively. This data seems to support the model minority myth. However, looking at Cambodian, Hmong, Laotian, Pacific Islanders, and Vietnamese, the numbers are significantly lower at 9.2%, 13.6%, and 13.8%. Once again, another group that would otherwise be lumped into the Asian American monolith possesses at 9.2% the lowest percentage of college degree attainment out of every other ethnic/racial group. We will now take a look at the last factor in determining the model minority, income, or median personal income. Median personal income for whites is $23,640, with Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, and Korean at $20,000, $26,000, $23,000, and $16,300, respectively. You can probably guess the trend by now, as of course, Cambodian, Hmong, Laotians, Pacific Islanders, and Vietnamese are much, much lower, at $16,000, $16,100, and $16,000. Many would still argue that yes, maybe all Asian Americans don't serve as a model minority, but what if you just include Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, and Koreans? There has to be a reason they have done so well in the proverbial melting pot that is the United States. Their statistics are significantly higher than all the other ethnicities. Their college education levels are significantly higher and their income is slightly less, but still competitive with whites. To this statement, I would answer, if the high levels of education of these Asian ethnic groups is really an indicator of the model minority status, I would argue no. The fact that they are more educated actually disproves the myth instead of supporting it. To the advocates, I would question, if these Asian American groups are so much more educated than whites, why is the median personal income of whites still so much higher than these Asian American groups? How can you justify that Koreans have almost double the percentage of college degrees than whites, but still earn just $16,300 compared to whites earning $23,640 each year? This is just empirical data that was relatively easy to find as well. I'm sure it would be possible to prove that Asian Americans are also underrepresented in positions of political leadership, CEOs, board members, sports teams, you name it. But I digress. I haven't exactly proved any of that in my argument so far. Moving past its overgeneralization, the model minority also fails to take into account the different historical contexts that have surrounded each and every ethnic group. Have Asians gone through slavery, lynching, and segregation like the African Americans? Have they gone through problems faced by Hispanic migrants who would continuously cross the border dozens of times? There are unique and unusual circumstances that each and every ethnic, racial group have undergone that others haven't. It is simply inaccurate and racist to assume that every group can achieve the model minority simply because empirically one racial/ethnic group is more successful than the other. Moving on, I'm sure many Asians believe that this stereotype is harmless. How can being portrayed as intelligent and hardworking be a negative thing? The truth is, once again bringing back the monolithic theme, Derek Chang, assistant professor of history at Cornell, states, "We have associated, historically, an ethnically diverse group of people under the model minority group: East Asians, Chinese and Japanese Americans, Southeast Asian groups. The model minority papers over ethnic and class diversity within those groups. Basically, by clumping all Asian Americans into one group, people tend to forget that while Chinese, Japanese, and Koreans statistically seem to be doing well, Cambodians, Hmong, Laotians, and Pacific Islanders are doing, if not worse, just as bad as blacks and Latinos/Hispanics. In fact, there are many supporters using the model minority to justify exclusion of Asian American communities in the distribution of assistance programs. But this stereotype doesn't only harm those who are in dire economic situations. It also harms Asians in our age group, Asians looking to apply for school or work. It was only a couple years ago that UC Berkeley, UCLA, and Stanford were accused of imposing a quota on admissions numbers for Asian Americans. They were accused of rejecting Asian students clearly qualified, while other, less qualified minorities were accepted. While the universities admitted there was a problem with these admission policies, they never admitted to any deliberate wrongdoing, which is as good as a confession. Harvey G. states that the model minority is a disingenuous stereotype created to perpetuate the dominance of white Americans, the key word being disingenuous. Do not believe that simply because the model minority deems Asians as smart and intelligent, it is not just as racist as any other stereotype that exists. The only question that remains is why this stereotype came about in the first place. In order to answer this question, we must look at the historical context of the 1960s, when the term model minority was first coined by sociologist William Peterson in a New York Times article. In this article, he describes Asian Americans as ethnic minorities who, despite marginalization, have achieved success in the United States. The 1960s were probably the height of the African American civil rights movement, which, as Rich said in section, was being publicly televised. There were constant images of African Americans being assailed by high-pressure water hoses, dogs, and police. I believe the model minority was created to, as Oyam Poon states, silence other people of color's attempts at demanding equity, and specifically in the 1960s to discredit the African American civil rights movement. It undermines claims of racism and attempts to portray the United States as an essentially fair place for all ethnic/racial minorities. And it does so in such a clever way that it remains in use today. There are even many Asian scholars in the community who believe the model minority to be true, such as William Wei, who states that if they, other ethnic minorities, work hard, have certain values, and are reasonably intelligent, they too can be successful. By using this stereotype to divide/conquer racial minority groups, advocates of the myth have established a racial hierarchy that even to this day denies the reality of oppression. So what should we do? In order to strive towards a more equal America, we must first shatter the myth of the model minority. We must not take the easy way out by pointing fingers at individual ethnic groups and blame them for being unable to succeed. We must look at each ethnic group individually, determine the issues they face, and tailor a plan suitable to each and every minority. While this is quite the daunting task, only once we have established that race is truly a social construct, that Asians are neither born with more intelligence or more hardworking than an African American or Hispanic, can we truly establish a non-racist society.